Everybody, sorry I was unable to meet with you on Friday. I have an appointment, and it's an important appointment, so I will be meeting with you via this video. And I thank you for indulging me in allowing me to do that. What I really wanted to talk about today is that fifth canon of rhetoric, the canon of delivery. I'm going to use the PowerPoint that I've uploaded to Moodle, and that you will find under the current week, and it is Chapter 8, Delivery. Now, some of the information that I'm going to talk about here is going to augment, depart a bit from what you have in your book. That's okay. I still think it's worth your while to read Chapter 8 in the book. And Chapter 8 is going to talk about some of the issues that we talked about on Wednesday with regard to words and tone and style. It's also going to talk about delivery. In particular, what I want to talk about regarding delivery is that if you go to your PowerPoint, you will see that your audience's perception of you and the message that you have is gained primarily through the sense of visual. What you see is what you get. And that stands to reason. Think about when you see somebody, that first impression that you have. You look, you see, you assess, you do the evaluative things based on all sorts of indications for that individual. You gain a sense of insight into that person based on their attire, based on their features, the way that you perceive them to be, of what age, of what profession. You get a sense of how serious that they are taking you because of all of that as well. A rule of thumb in regard to delivery for a speech is recognize what your audience's expectation is and go one step above that. Go a step above that. You don't want to diminish your audience's perception of you based on their visual sense of you. But I want to point to the statistic that is in that PowerPoint, which shows that audiences' perception of you is gained primarily through the sense of sight. So visual is the most important. Second is vocal. That is the tone in your voice that you are setting. And last is verbal. So think about how you perceive people. You first capture through your eyes, then your ears, and you pick up that sense of tone. And that either makes you attracted, anxious, etc. And then lastly, you listen to the words. That's just the way things go. I don't want you to get the impression that your speech, therefore, really should be all visual. No. My point is to make you understand that your visual delivery is very important for your audience's perception of you, who you are, what your message is, and how important they will perceive you. So, with that in mind, I'm going to continue on discussing delivery. And when we talk about delivery in speech, there are a couple of different things that we refer to in the realm of delivery. First, I mentioned delivery as your combination, the putting it all together, the structure that you've decided for your speech, the topic and the research and the outline and your practice and your consideration for your tone. And now you are delivering your speech. You are standing in front of us. You are uttering the words that you chose that correspond to the topic that you picked, the audience analysis that you have made, and now you are bringing it all to life. That's one way that we are discussing delivery. The other way in speech that we refer to delivery, we talk about modes of delivery. And for this class, the mode of delivery that we have chosen to focus on is the mode of extemporaneous speech. Extemporaneous speech means that you have done all the things that I have described. You've pondered what is the topic that you are going to discuss. You have done some research. You have then considered how you are going to best, most effectively, most efficiently convey that message by structuring it, outlining it. You maybe make notes and put those on your note cards. But when it comes right down to the speech, you are not reading from a script. You are standing in front of an audience and you are talking to us in a fairly casual way. That's called extemporaneous. So the idea is to build on this idea of conversation, to be in the moment so you can take advantage of the spontaneity that exists. You can therefore provide feedback to your audience if they have questions, if they look agitated, if they look impatient, if they look confused, if they look bored. You can respond in ways that fill in the gaps, that improve your audience's perception. Maybe add some clarity, add some energy. Whatever it is that you are getting for feedback, through that sense of in the moment and spontaneity, you are best able to take advantage of the audience that you have in front of you. The other modes of delivery are memorized. If you've ever witnessed a forensics meet, a speech meet, you will generally see that unless the specialty is extemporaneous or impromptu, the speeches are all memorized. They are practiced. That's an example of a memorized speech. Maybe another example to give you of a memorized speech would be a comedy routine. Those are indeed speeches, but they are very precisely organized, committed to memory, so that the speaker can then be assured that what they intend is exactly what's delivered. Another is manuscript. You will see manuscript speeches if ever you witness, as example, President Kraft giving his State of the College speech, the President of the United States giving the State of the Union speech. Maybe the Secretary of State is addressing the State Department or a gathering of world leaders at the UN, etc. That's a manuscript speech. And in that example for a manuscript speech, you are reading from a prepared set of remarks, a script, and that prepared script is something that you make available to your audience. So it is very formal, it's generally very official. The last one I've made mention of is impromptu. That's very much in the moment. That is reflective of something that the moment demands. As example, if you decide that you need to stand and praise somebody, celebrate somebody, eulogize somebody, those are impromptu speeches. Sometimes you see those in welcoming speeches, retirement speeches, toasts that are given. Those are examples of impromptu. We, as I mentioned, are focusing on extemporaneous speeches because that is the most common form of speech that people give, including speeches that are given to audiences large and small. You you prepare the speech, you understand your topic, you maybe make a corresponding PowerPoint presentation, some sort of presentation, visual sensory aid that goes along with it, and you then deliver it. But you interact, you engage with your audience, you have some form of dialogue. So that is the most common, and that's why we focus on extemporaneous speech as the kind of speech that we really want to give you experience in. When I mentioned those ideas of visual, vocal, verbal, the vocal and the verbal are examples that I mentioned in my lecture on words. Really, I was focusing mostly on the verbal, and now we're going to move into the vocal when we are in the realm of delivery. But you've made choices about the vocal tonality as you are considering the words that you're going to use. Visual delivery is something very different, but it's also something that you can do inherently. It's very instinctual. When you stand in front of an audience, when you stand in front of another, you automatically have a whole series of facial expressions that you are using. You have gestures that you use. You strike a certain posture that is reflective of your feeling at the moment. Is it formal? Is it informal? Casual? Are you at pains to do something? Are you anxious? Are you relaxed? All of that is conveyed through posture, your gestures, the movement that you have. I see plenty of people when they speak, they get up and they dance, they move forward, they move back, they sway side to side. All of that conveys to me something that I discern when I am watching that speech. So those of you who pace, you move, you step, you dance, you sway, all of that is indicative to me of a sense of anxiousness. If you ever witnessed, as I mentioned earlier, a speech given by a speech team, they program, they practice, they choreograph their movement so it corresponds, it is consistent with the message that they're trying to give. So that is an example of something that's very considered. So those are examples of visual delivery. And for gestures, you've got natural gestures. Some of them are emblems. These are specific. They replace a word or they amplify a word. So if I were to say, I've got an idea, you have an idea. You get a sense of what I mean by that. Or illustrators. They clarify words or ideas. So if I talk about my partner and I say, she's a beautiful lady, well, you see the gesture that I would include for that. Or if I were to say that somebody or something is very small, very large, you get corresponding gestures that amplify the meaning of the words that I'm using. Regulators regulate what we want you to do. If I want you to look somewhere, if I want you to stop, if I want you to be quiet, those are regulators with regard to what I want you to do. Finally, adapters. These are the things that I mentioned earlier, the bobbing, the swaying, the dancing. Sometimes people play with their hair. When I get my mutton chops back, I perhaps start to play with my facial hair. That's all a reflection of anxiousness or nerves. So those are adapters. So that gives you an idea of some of the things that occur with regard to visual delivery. And you know how important it is. Gestures really help your audience understand the message that you have. They also engage your audience's eyes and their minds. So when I talked about dual coding as something very important as you have your visual aids and visual delivery. These dual codings engage your audience. They're not just sitting there listening to the words. They are gaining a greater sense of the meaning that you have because of the movements and gestures that you have. In regard to the tonality, your vocal delivery, those are things like the tone of your voice, the pitch, the sound that you evoke. How fast are you speaking? Are you pausing? How are you articulating the words? Are you precise in the way that we hear them? That is a vocal delivery, and all of that conveys much to your audience, their sense of you as well. So that is a very important component of delivery as well. I want to bring up the concept of immediacy. All of these things are what I said as earlier, ways that you are engaging your audience. You are conveying tonality. You're conveying this sense of in the moment recognition, validation of your audience. And that immediacy is that connection that your audience has with you, an emotional connection, that emotion that you are soliciting through the tone of your voice, the gestures that you have, the posture that you strike. So I give you some examples of verbal immediacy. Are you being casual? Are you being personalized? Are you humorous? Recognizing the need for your audience's response to what you are saying. Vocal immediacy, that's that tone. Are you bringing them close through that sort of beautiful tone of your voice? Or are you harsh because you know that you need to make a point? Think of sometimes that your parent, grandparent, neighbor, whoever was trying to very specifically convey something to you. You hear it in the tone of their voice. Sometimes it's volume, pitch. Those either bring you closer or push you back. And those should be things that are considered and intentional. When we talk about visual immediacy, forming that emotional bridge with your audience, you do that through making eye contact with them, through gestures that draw them in, right? Movement is important too. If I were just to be very stoic and statuesque and not have any movement, that's really quite puzzling. Your audience is going to be left confused, so that sense of naturalness is important. Movement is vital. I direct you again to your book. You're going to have some more information that helps you understand, but I think you get what the ideas are with regard to immediacy. In regard to delivery, to make sure that all of this works in the way that you intend, there's no better method than to simply practice your speech. Practice in front of a mirror. Practice so that you are familiar with what you are going to say next. Practice so you hear in your own voice the tone that you are striking. Practice so you know when to stand still, when to be dramatic, when to pause. Practice is the best way for you to ensure that your delivery is consistent with your intention. That is all that I really wanted to get across to you with regard to delivery. I'm going to give you an example, though, of vocal, maybe visual, and I'm going to use a book. Perhaps you remember when you were a kid and it was story time, and you were with a parent, a teacher, grandma, aunt, whomever it might be, and they sat you down and they wanted to read. As example, something from Dr. Seuss. When you read Dr. Seuss, when you had those examples, you had a combination of gesture, pause, drama. The words themselves were accompanied by vocal tonality and facial expressions. So I'm going to read to you a little bit from the Sneetches so you get an idea of what I mean. Now, the star-bellied Sneetches had bellies with stars. The plain-bellied Sneetches had none upon theirs. Those stars weren't so big, they were really so small. You might think such a thing wouldn't matter at all. But because they had stars, all the star-bellied Sneetches would brag, "We're the best kind of Sneetch on the beaches." With their snoots in the air, they would puff and they'd snort. "We've got nothing to do with the plain-bellied sort." And whenever they met some, when they were out walking, they'd hike right on past them without even talking. When the star-bellied children went out to play ball, could the plain-bellied Sneetches get in the game? Not at all. You only could play if your bellies had stars, and the plain-bellied ones had none upon theirs. When the star-bellied Sneetches had Frankfurter roasts or picnics or parties or marshmallow toasts, they never invited the plain-bellied Sneetches. They left them out cold in the dark of the beaches. They kept them away, never let them come near, and that's how they treated them, year after year. Then one day, it seems, while the plain-bellied Sneetches were moping and doping, alone on the beaches, just sitting there wishing their bellies had stars, a stranger zipped up in the strangest of cars. "My friends," he announced in a voice clear and clean, "my name is Sylvester McMonkey McBean, and I've heard of your troubles. I heard you're unhappy. But I can fix that. I'm the fix-it-up chappie. I've come here to help you. I have what you need, and my prices are low, and I work at great speed, and my work is 100% guaranteed." Then quickly Sylvester McMonkey McBean put together a very peculiar machine. And he said, "You want stars like the star-bellied Sneetch, my friends? You can have them for $3 each. Just pay me your money and hop right aboard." So they clambered inside, and the big machine roared, and it clonked, and it bonked, and it jerked, and it burked, and it bopped them about. But the thing really worked. When the plain-bellied Sneetches popped out, they had stars. They actually did. They had stars upon theirs. Then they yelled at the ones who had stars at the start. "We're exactly like you. You can't tell us apart. We're all just the same now, you snooty old smarties. And now we can go to your Frankfurter parties." "Good grief," groaned the ones who had stars at the first. "We're still the best Sneetches, and they are the worst. But now, how in the world will we know," they all frowned, "if which kind is what, or the other way around?" Then up came McBean with a very sly wink, and he said, "Things are not quite as bad as you think, so you don't know who's who. That's perfectly true. But come with me, friends. Do you know what I'll do? I'll make you again the best Sneetches on beaches, and all it'll cost you is $10 eaches." Star or belly stars are no longer in style, said McBean. What you need is a trip through my star off machine. This wondrous contraption will take off your stars so you won't look like Sneetches who have stars upon theirs. And that handy machine worked very precisely, removed all the stars from their tummies quite nicely. Then, with snoots in the air, they paraded about, and they opened their beaks, and they let out a shout. We know who is who, now there isn't a doubt. The best kind of Sneetches are Sneetches without. Then, of course, those with stars all got frightfully mad. To be wearing a star now was frightfully bad. Then, of course, old Sylvester McMonkey McBean invited them into his star-off machine. And, of course, from then on, as you probably guess, things really got into a horrible mess. All the rest of that day, on those wild, screaming beaches, the fix-it-up chappie kept fixing up Sneetches. Off again, on again, in again, out again. Through the machine they raced round and about again, changing their stars every minute or two. They kept paying money. They kept running through, until neither the plane nor the star-belly knew whether this one was that one, or that one was this one, or which one was what one, or what one was who. Then, when every last cent of their money was spent, the fix-it-up chappie packed up, and he went. And he laughed as he drove in his car up the beach. They never will learn. No, you can't teach a Sneetch. But McBean was quite wrong. I'm happy to say that the Sneetches got really quite smart on that day. The day they decided that Sneetches are Sneetches, and no kind of Sneetch is the best on the beaches. That day, all the Sneetches forgot about stars and whether they had one or not upon theirs. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.